Welcome to another episode of Team Anywhere, where CEOs, leaders, and experts at building teams,
companies,
organizations,
and amazing cultures share how to lead from anywhere in the world. I'm your co-host on the East Coast, Ginny Bianco Mathis.
And I'm your co-host on the West Coast, Mitch Simon. And we invite you to join us to Team Anywhere. We've all heard about the amazing power of gratitude, but can gratitude lead people to be better problem solvers? Can gratitude lead to cross-functional teams coming together? Can gratitude lead to greater levels of productivity? In today's episode, we interview Lexy Thompson, author of the recently released book, The Power of a Graceful Leader. In this episode, Lexi uncovers how gratitude leads to creating new possibilities. It even helped a leader she coached succeed in a turnaround.
Welcome to another episode of Team Anywhere, and I am happy to be here with my co-host, Mitch Simon, on the West Coast, and I'm on the East Coast, and we are thrilled today to have the wonderful Lexy Thompson, who is going to share with us the work she has done in the field of the power of a graceful leader. And in fact, that is the name of her new book, what she will share with us. And Lexi has been an adjunct, still is, for the Center of Creative Leadership, which is quite a lift. That is fabulous, and is part of the Forbes Coaching Council. And she's known for developing the tribal gratitude journals, and we'll probably hear a little bit about that also. So welcome, Lexi.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Just thrilled, as I already mentioned. So to begin, would love to hear about what your year has been like. I don't think any group can get together without having a discussion. What has been the influence on you? How have you grown? Have you navigated it?
Yeah. So in relationship to COVID, I'm guessing is where we're going with this, right? So I had a practice of flying places every month for half a month at a time, and that stopped completely. And then some revenue that went with that flying went with it, right? So I remember the moment in March when I went, oh, this is quite interesting. I'm not sure where this is going to go, how long this is going to last. Within 3 days, several clients called and said, hey, we don't know what to tell you. We're going to have to cancel this and cancel that. And oddly enough, I remember feeling a lot of relief. So, I saw the bank account quickly going, oh, that's not going to happen and that's not going to happen. I also didn't see myself drudging to the airport to get on a plane to be somewhere. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was an interesting internal response to many thousands of dollars going down the toilet. Because I would have expected that I would panic. And I was pleasantly surprised to see that I did not panic. It's not to say that I didn't have moments of panic after that moment, but in that moment, I didn't. That wasn't my first instinctive response. And I'm an introvert by nature. And so I think that was probably part of it, was like, hey, I don't have to do the grind kind of thing. Yeah, I love going. Once I'm there, I'm fine. It's like going to the gym. It's just getting there.
Yes.
But I think COVID for me has had another impact. Was we've opened up in the process of opening a leadership retreat center here in Vermont. So you can imagine that none of those retreats happened either, right? Yeah. We had lined up a couple. We were going to open full steam fall of last year. Well, that hasn't happened and still hasn't happened. And so it was a humbling experience on many levels to understand the lack of control that I have, or we have at large. I'm sure a lot of us have reckoned with that as a result of this impact, however it's come for you. But I have a really robust gratitude practice, and as a result, I'll sit in the wallow for a while, but I don't spend lots of time there. I'm looking for the creative opportunity that sits on the other side of most of these things. And it resulted in finishing that book that we're about ready to talk about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nicely did. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was so thrilled when I saw it being introduced. So let's move to that. You highlight three main components of the graceful leadership: integration, alignment, and flow. Could you talk about those a little bit, please?
Sure. So I've been in the executive leadership space and coaching and consulting for a couple of decades now. And
Hmm.
one of the things that I have found that I enjoy, and it's just kind of innate, is I look for patterns. And they obviously, if you're looking for them, they'll present themselves. And so those three things seem to be consistent personal and professional barriers as leaders work to ascend in their career path. And and quite intimate as well, right? So
Yeah.
when you talk to someone about, are you in your flow? They kind of look at you like, I don't even know what you're asking me, right? So then you go, okay, well, are you in alignment? And they're like, well, yeah, I'm meeting all my goals, my metrics are through the roof. And you're like, yeah, not quite what I was thinking, but that's great, right? We definitely need those performance things. And then integration wasn't even worth talking about, because if we couldn't go to flow and in alignment, integration was definitely, if it was happening, in some cases it was happening, it was definitely not a conscious, intentional event. So that's kind of how the three of these kind of came into being to explore.
So share with us an example of this leader who is working with his or her team and he's in flow. What actions would we see? What behaviors would we see?
Yeah, so I think that there's some big variables about the person's strength set and their orientation to their craft. But some common themes that I've seen is that when a leader's in flow, they're there and they're not called in very often, because they've deployed a team that's capable and innovating and problem solving. And so they're just there to remove barriers or open doors. And
Mm-hmm.
and that's all they need to do. But that's a very vulnerable place for a leader to be, because prior to that moment, you're also acknowledging the fact that you aren't really needed anymore, right? And while we all talk about having a strong bench and making sure you have succession planning, when it comes to knocking on your own door, it's a very vulnerable place to be. But it's
Mm-hmm.
almost a prerequisite to knowing that you're finding flow as a leader. Because the more you're in your flow, the less you're doing the command and control type of leading, and you're kind of just um, kind of becoming maybe the bumpers on the bowling alley, right? You're there, but they don't need you very often. They kind of have to bump in to know that you're even there. And that, I think that's a kind of a good clue to know when you're in flow, and and what it would feel like and what it could look like to people watching, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like your analogy of the bowling alley and the bumpers. That so a leader comes to you and says, like you said already, I'm doing well. Um, I hear you do some cool things with leaders, or you can help me get to a place I'm not at.
Yeah.
What kind of questions do you ask that leader?
Well,
And
I mean,
no, go ahead.
yeah, in that particular situation, I'd be like, well, what makes you think you're not where you need to be? You know,
Hmm.
where is this utopia of a place you think you should be? Tell me about
Yeah.
that. And oftentimes that leads into a pretty personal situation or a conversation around, I wake up in the morning and I'm nailing it and I'm making a buttload of money, but man, there's got to be something else. This
Hmm.
cannot be all that there is as a leader and as maybe a business owner. Um, and so that's a deep conversation into looking at alignment and understanding. Okay, so if that's the truth, or that's the thing you want to explore, then let's look at a future state of what you can imagine. We talk about goals. What's your 5-year goal? What's your 10-year goal? But very often we don't ask people, how does it feel when you're
Hmm.
5 years down the road? And
Hmm.
we just ask, what are the metrics for 5 years down the road? And we answer 20% revenue, 4 new offices, I'm jet setting around the world. But how does that feel? Because if I was to give you that scenario as success, which I would have at one point in my career, I would have slowed down and told you that didn't feel good. I didn't want to be jet setting around the world. I didn't want to be responsible for 4 new stores,
Yeah.
and
Right.
that's kind of where you start to get really honest about who you are and what you do.
I love that. And now, again, I'm going to push you on. Now you have this team, and I'm starting to realize this myself. Okay. And I'm trying to be more aligned about this inner piece of me. We've been hearing a lot of things around be more mindful, ask more questions, reach out in a more emotional way. Um, Again, what kinds of techniques? And I know we don't like to say, oh, just plaster these techniques and you're going to be aligned. And yet there are certain practice things. Uh, what have you seen worked?
Well, in all candor, what I have found to be the fastest portal into this is a gratitude practice. And people laugh at me. I remember I used to send executive leaders these leather binder like journals that with empty in the middle, right? And I'd send it and say, okay, we're going to journal. And they'd be like, no, not really. We're not doing that. Don't even know what that is. Next. So that's why I ended up developing those journals that I did create, because it was more of a quick hit, fast fix, 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes at night, but they were still getting the mindset shift to look for what was working instead of what wasn't working. Not to ignore what wasn't working, but to understand that's just a small part of the collective picture. So a gratitude practice is one really, really quick way when you really get in the flow of it to make that shift in mindset that's requested to be a graceful leader.
So the 10 minutes in the morning and the 10 minutes at night begins to create a habit.
Yep.
Begins to grow that muscle.
Yeah. A lot of times I'm reading now, like, what are the 10 mindfulness hacks, or hack for this, or a hack for this performance? I suppose gratitude could be considered a hack, right? It is a very, very specific and very heart-centered activity, which is required in order to enter grace.
Now, would you in turn, or do you encourage leaders to then turn around? Hey, the whole team should be doing journaling.
Well, sure, and not everybody's going to journal, right? So,
right.
A gratitude journaling is a entry point into a gratitude practice. It's certainly not the only one. It's effective, but there's a lot of science about gratitude now. You can do that through a gratitude walk. You can be in nature. You can practice your just simply expressing appreciation where it matters, in real time. One of the biggest pushbacks I get is, oh, great, now I'm going to go tell everybody how thankful I am for them, and they're all going to want to raise. And I'm like, really? Like, wow, okay, well, that's a place to start, right? And so we have to have the conversation between recognition and gratitude. At some point, they could be the same thing, but they don't necessarily
That's
mean
right.
the same thing. So there's, again, it's really bringing in some of that gray matter, and it doesn't have to look the same for everybody. There's we're working on gratitude in a library system in Colorado right now. And so we spend quite a few weeks, and everyone's starts with a journal, but then 10% are always going to throw the journal in the corner and say, that's not my thing. And that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. They're going to find other ways. They're like, I write a note every day and drop it in a jar. Fine, great. That's awesome.
Yes.
And you can get really creative. It's really about looking for what's working and looking for magical moments in life.
Yes, yes. And
what is it? What does that look like when you're in a team meeting, especially now with remote or hybrid teams? What might a gratitude practice look like on that team?
Yeah, so, well, I can tell you exactly how it looks because there's quite a few I'm working with. So they'll open up with what's working before they go to solve a problem. And really interestingly enough is especially when on purpose we get cross-functional teams coming together for this reason, they have really, really, and especially in this more virtual world, they're finding very innovative solutions, because all of a sudden I'm listening to accounting express hey, we're really thankful that we got the accounting cycle closed 10% faster than we're used to. This is why we're doing it. All of a sudden I'm in supply chain. I'm like, oh my God, that thing will work over here through this application, and we're able to do whatever we do for our processes over here. And all of a sudden the possibility has exponential impact, because one person just came in and said, I'm really grateful that we got closed down in 10 days faster. And the other team's like, wow, I think we can use that over here. And they're realizing that direct impact in a different way in the business. And that wasn't happening before because, quite frankly, we didn't walk 3 stories up to accounting, right? We would email,
Right.
and that's not a great way to do it all the time for sure. And so that interaction wasn't happening. So a lot of ways that we're helping combat like Zoom fatigue and things like that is to have these kinds of cross-functional meetings because it requires a level of presence when you're with people you don't know than if you're doing the mundane Monday morning meeting call out with your intact team. Now, with an intact team, you can do it as well. There's other ways to, like I call it gratitude in action. Like, how did you express your gratitude? Not just what you're talking to. And those teams have myriad of different ways of expressing gratitude. And there's a bazillion ways, really innovative ways they're doing it. And that just keeps the possibility. So the other thing is when you're in and you start with the negative, which is going to happen, right? You have a
Right.
problem. It's a crisis. We have to deal with it right now. The platitudes of nice, those utopia are going to have to be on the end of the meeting.
Yeah.
So inevitably they state the crisis or problem, and then immediately someone on the team says, okay, what's the possibility in the current situation? So now you've acknowledged the situation. You're not placating it or gaslighting it. You're acknowledging it, and then all of a sudden you're lifting your gaze up going, okay, what's the possibility? And that changes everything versus here's the problem. What are we going to do? Whose fault is it? Da, 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 da.
Oh, yeah. So just concentrating on the concept of gratitude, and you can have it can be a concept, or as you said, gratitude in action. You immediately are changing the mindsets of how we're approaching things.
Yes.
Because if I'm appreciating Mitch, I'll be less inclined to say, Mitch, you're driving me crazy.
Or at least when you say he's driving you crazy, you'll do it with kindness and love and respect for him that you might not otherwise do.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. That's fabulous. Can you share one or two, or maybe the most significant, of a turnaround you had? I mean, someone I would call a hard case, just did not want to go there to
Yeah.
this gratitude stuff.
Yeah. So working in oil and gas with a client in Texas. And that's a pretty, engineering's kind of, it either works or it doesn't work, right? It's pretty black. And you want that to be black and white. You don't want to go, we see the possibility in the plane taking off and staying intact. You actually want them to know that's going to happen.
Exactly.
So, right. So there's a senior VP that I have the absolute honor of working with the past couple of years. And in the beginning of our time together, he said things like, oh my God, do we really have to spend time being nice to each other? Can we just get to business?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it didn't happen overnight. And let's fast forward to they were struggling with going virtual pre-COVID. He's like, okay, this isn't going to work. We don't need to bother with that. This is what we know works. I know those young people want the pleasure of working from home, but we're not going to do that. Okay. 3 months before COVID hit, he has a pretty developed HR business partner that knew that that's what had to happen, whether he knew it or not.
Yeah.
So he was creating the framework and the possibilities and the systems while he's hearing this isn't going to happen. 3 months later, COVID comes. It's happening. Whether you like it or not, it's here. And thank God they had some systems. It wasn't perfect, but they weren't totally caught off guard. And now this was just we all just sat there and went, huh? Like this. We were in an executive team meeting and they're talking about how to re-enter the workforce, right? Because that's a topic right now. And they're like, okay, so do we bring everybody back in? How are we going to do that? Are we going to do that? Are we going to renew our lease? All the conversations everybody's dealing with. And he goes, you know what? We're not going to do that right now. And everybody went, huh? And he goes, nope. He says, I don't think we're ready yet. And when we do it, it's going to be voluntary. If someone feels ready and able and capable to do that, they can go back into the office with the right protocols. And if they don't, we're going to have tolerance for that as well. Now that is a football field away from where he started a year and a half prior to COVID.
Yes.
And that's transformational.
Yes. Yeah, that's wonderful. And of course, that message then is passed on to his team, and the richness keeps going.
Yeah, and they're innovating like nobody's business right now, which is really
Yeah.
fun to see.
Oh.
So Lexi, so with that gentleman, you had worked on, I guess you'd worked a year and a half on being present, being grateful.
Yeah, and just we would talk about in his one-on-one sessions, like, what do you want for your life? No one had asked him that in a decade, right? He knew
Mm-hmm.
financial measures. That was easy. Well, I need this and I need that and I need that. And now all of a sudden he's like, I'll continue in this role if I don't have to go back to the office very often. That's him talking. I want to get in an RV. I want to travel the country. I want to come spend time at Ubuntu with Lexi. I want to do these things. And all of a sudden, all of that became possible simply overnight. And he sees a world of possibility for himself. And when you see it for yourself, it's much easier to extend it to others.
Ah,
Yeah.
there you go.
Wow. So I love this. I love this connection that you're making between getting present, feeling grateful, and creating possibilities, creating, new things that you wouldn't have seen them
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
Which is again, it's wonderful to see. And then it's one of those things where, as someone who doesn't come from that background, how do you get me on the same page to have the patience to not throw away the journal,
Mm-hmm.
to sit for 5 minutes so that I can actually get to that place. That's I think it's the challenge, it's the opportunity.
Yeah, I
I
think
guess
both, right? And so,
yeah.
I mean, that's if you're working with someone, that's really the job of figuring out where the interest and the passion and the previous moments of finding flow exist. Even if you have to go back to your college days, it doesn't matter. You know,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that's where you weren't so constrained with your reality of adulting that you were more liberated to be experiencing life on life's terms, which is really all any of us can do. COVID has got to teach us that. I mean,
Yeah.
this is a tough place to be and a tough time to be there, but it's so ripe for new possibilities. It's so ripe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You recently wrote an article, and you touched upon this a little bit, on why some leaders, this is such a challenge for them,
Yeah.
why they won't go right on the journey.
Yeah, yeah. So there was four piece parts of that article, and it was inconvenience, pain, work, and the risk of it. So
Uh,
the inconvenience is kind of like there's a little bit of a sacrifice. And the example I used in the article was we were building a home. We want to be good stewards of the planet. I come from an oil and gas environment, being in Texas for so long. So many of my clients are there. So, and yeah, I was like, oh, should I have propane for backup energy? Because that's a little incongruent with what we say we want to do here, And so
right.
that mean I have to learn how to use an induction stove. Oh God, that's going to be awful, right? And
Yeah.
it, and it's a conundrum because then at the end of the day, I'm in the mountains. I need backup energy. It's a reality, and the only source, because we didn't have solar yet, is there's a propane tank out in the yard. So there's this
Mm-hmm.
constant wrestling between once you know who you are and where you're going and your purpose and your why in the world. There's a reckoning you have to do very frequently about the alignment piece there, and that was just a small example of one I've had to wrestle with.
That's great, because letting folks know it's a fact, and you will be wrestling with it.
Mm-hmm.
Now you know more about yourself and where you want to go, and you're going to have a lot of wrestling, and that's okay. That's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, it's part of the process. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And then another reason was pain. A lot of times when people enter into grace and when they really go into an internal conversation in your internal landscape, the reason you haven't done it in the million masks that you've created to function in the world, your egoic self, which isn't innately bad or good, it just is. Being willing to look behind those, there's a lot of courage it takes many times, depending, variations of that for everybody, of course. But most of us would just rather not, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's good until it's not. Everything's good. I don't have any reason to go digging up that monster.
That's right.
Yeah.
I want to be
I'm
stupid.
fine.
Thank you.
I'm fine.
I mean,
Yeah, everything's
ignorance is
fine.
bliss in some points. I mean,
Yeah.
we all know it's there. None of us got out of childhood without a wound. Not one of us. And no matter how utopic your childhood was, there's something there to deal with. And why dredge it up, But the reality is in order to get back to flow, to create alignment, to become a conscious being, that's part of the process.
Right.
Yeah. So work was the part where you're talking now about, Mitch was like, okay, let's just get the results. And now I'm saying, let's have the feelings. How do you feel about
Right.
those results? He's like, I don't care. I got them. We're good. And so now being willing to talk about how we feel about things that's a whole podcast on itself. Right.
Yeah.
And people will do many, many, many things, addictions and otherwise, to avoid feeling many things.
Oh yeah.
So there's another rub. And then, not much less deal with my own feelings, but now I have a whole company of people that actually have feelings that somehow I'm going to have to synthesize. I'm good. We're good. And then risk, we talk about risk. We've come so far in our culture litigiously that, in bigger corporations, it's hard to be a business leader and know your people without feeling really tentative and cautious and maybe afraid to be able to ask them what we now consider intimate questions. Like, how come you're not feeling good? Is there something I can do for you? Ooh, don't ask that question. Don't ask that question. So we have those real barriers in a lot of our business structures that create a real issue.
Mm-hmm. And so then we have to go to the gracefulness of it all, and to give folks permission. It's okay to go there.
Yeah, but
make it safe.
Yeah,
right?
The dilemma is, though, this is one of the biggest hurdles is we can do that, and we can say that, and we can even mean that, and we can put up, appreciative inquiry. We can do all kinds of good things in our organization. And then our HR system is still rewarding this other behavior.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Oh,
and
yeah.
so our compensation and our metrics actually frustrate this new system we're trying to create. And so we actually end up at times doing more damage than we are good. So we have to be willing to overhaul our systems as well as our internal systems, as well as our external systems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like to say you have to build the infrastructures now to support it, or it just becomes mud on the wall. Oh, that's interesting. And then they walk away from your retreat, and that's it, right?
Yep. Yep.
Well, this is fascinating. What recommendations do you have for leaders going into 2021?
Oh boy. I think that leaders going into 2021 need to be still inside themselves more often than they're willing to be, because it can be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And really listen to the intuitive sense of who they are, and then go test the hypothesis. Do not assume your intuition is everybody's truth, because it's simply not reality.
Mm-hmm.
So if I sit here and say, as a business owner, I have an intuitive sense, everybody wants to be back in the office. Everybody, right?
Right.
The truth is that depending on the type of business, there's going to be a bulk of people that actually that is true for.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also going to be Lexi who's like, nah, not really. I'm good over here. I got my metrics all working out. I've got it figured out. I don't need to be back in the office. And so there's a very big conversation around the flow of how we work right now. And leaders, many of the leaders that I have the honor to work with are willing to hold that conversation and really allow the conversation to evolve over a period of time, rather than one conversation, a decision, and executing. Because this is an emotionally heavy lift for everyone.
What you just said, there is an incredible amount of patience, I think, that comes with a graceful leader. Mm-hmm. It doesn't happen all in the one meeting. And that's uncomfortable for them. Mm-hmm. Right? As you said, it's real typical. No, I really did the problem solving and the cost benefit analysis, and here's the decision. Yeah. You are so right. Yeah. Just that mindset. Which the whole new hybrid environment is forcing us to look at.
Yeah.
That's I really love that. Stand still. Yeah. Well, we've learned that. Yeah. Mitch, any final thoughts?
I would love to end this podcast with a couple, practices that you would suggest that leaders take on, because yes, we've been in this for a year. I just do think that a lot of people have used this year to to find out that there's something to listen to in themselves, but still have not, like, kicking and screaming, like, I don't know, I'm not going there. I'm just going to wait for this thing to go over and go back to normal. And of course, what you're pointing out is that these are just incredibly great leadership skills that this new environment has, thrust upon us. And so for those of us who are not yet practicing patience and grace and listening to our intuition, what are some practices that you would suggest that we take on?
Yeah, so I think it's going to be obvious that I'm going to say gratitude practice. And it doesn't have to be a journal. It can literally be many other things. The next thing is, I would say, use the skill of curiosity. And when you feel like you're digging in or you have resistance to an internal conversation with yourself, or definitely when it's external to people that you're leading, that you offer yourself the pregnant pause of grace to say, I'm curious about why this is happening. And I'm going to pause for a minute enough to look and then listen before I act. A lot of things that we thought we knew in the business structure are no longer true. They've been shattered. And I would even assert that they were never true, but we had them cloaked so well inside a system that we believe them to be true. And maybe perhaps a better way to say it is the real truth is sitting there waiting for a leader who's brave enough to really make the inquiry gently and kindly into it. And the third thing is to just be gentle with yourself and be willing to look within, whether that's with a coach, in a meditation practice, sitting out in nature and talking to a tree, your dog, it doesn't matter. But be willing to take a look at you. Yeah.
Those were great. Those were great. Lexi, your book is out.
Yeah.
I guess we can find it where?
On Amazon.
Okay, on Amazon. Yeah. And of course, we can find you on LinkedIn and your website.
And Facebook and Instagram. Yep.
Terrific.
All those places. Yep.
All right. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's been very rich.
Thank you very much for the time. And thank you. I've listened to several of the podcasts and I've gotten some really good nuggets myself, and I appreciate you both making the time to offer this to the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Lexi.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Lexi, for being our guest. And thank you to our great listeners for another episode of Team Anywhere. And please share this podcast, like Lexi is, with your friends, because, there's a lot of really great information on how we handle this new hybrid world together. All right. And we'll see you next time.